Okay, well, before we get started to wrap up our look at the facts of the resurrection, a reminder that next week we'll have another installment on how to not interpret the Bible. There is a video that's been going around of a guy who claims to be a Christian minister, where he states that Jesus is racist and had to learn to overcome his racism in the Gospels. And so we'll take a look at that next week. Racist Jesus. So that'll be fun. It's always good, to see what other people do wrong. I heard the comparison, like, whenever you're taking driver's ed or defensive driving or something, they show you pictures of car wrecks to show you what to avoid. Here's how you don't do that because, car wreck. Same thing with interpreting the Bible. It's good to see examples of, don't do this because that's a total train wreck. And so that'll be next week. We'll look at how this guy came to the conclusion that Jesus is racist, what he did wrong so that we can avoid those errors in interpreting the Bible. Okay, but tonight, Facts of the Resurrection, Part 3, third and final. Okay. Now, remember, we're kind of taking this look at what are the facts, what's the evidence, what are the things that we have to account for, and then which view of things best accounts for it, right? We compared it to the idea of a map, right? If you said, hey, you draw Texas and you draw Texas, how would you know whose concept of Texas is closer to the truth? Well, you'd have to compare it to the real map of Texas, and one would be good, one would not fit, and so that's how you'd know what's closer to the truth. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the evidence, and as an outline, we are using the book Core Facts by Dr. Braxton Hunter. Good guy. Recommend him and checking him out. And so just recap what we have gone through so far, looking at the facts. We saw that Jesus' crucifixion was indeed fatal. He really did die. Historians all agree Jesus was crucified on a Roman cross under Pontius Pilate in Jerusalem, and so outside of Jerusalem. And so that's a historical fact. Historians generally agree that, yes, there are reports of Jesus appearing to his disciples after the fact. Then that this was an early testimony by the church that they were committed to this. Right? The historians agree that the disciples, they went from being scared and running and hiding, because their leader just got killed, to boldly proclaiming and being committed to proclaiming the resurrection to the point of willing to die is how committed they were. You have the testimony of history, whether it's the scriptures, whether it is other non-biblical historical accounts, whether it is the early church. And everything points to the claim Jesus rose from the dead. And then lastly, what we're going to look at tonight is we have salvation. So you have all of those facts supporting the resurrection, and then you have, of course, the idea that it wasn't all for just, because he felt like dying and coming back, but it was for a reason that we might be saved. Right? The John 3:16, everyone knows and loves, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Right? That right there, that's the summary of why this took place, why Jesus died and rose again, and therefore we are saved. Which, of course, the question comes up, well, saved from what? Right? Because a lot of times, this kind of thing will focus on, okay, what's the evidence for the resurrection? You get to all this, and it's like, okay, so he rose from the dead. Believe in Jesus to be saved. Saved from what? So you got to actually look at that, right? Saved from the just consequences of our sin. Right? I mean, we're sinners, right? The just penalty for sinning against, committing crimes against, transgressing against an everlasting, just, and holy God demands an everlasting penalty. So who could pay an everlasting penalty except God himself, who is the only everlasting one? And so only God could pay that price for us. And since God is just, he had to punish evil. He's just, he's good, he's righteous. He could not let it go. He had to punish evil, but because God is also loving, he had to offer a way for pardon, for forgiveness, for mercy. And so became a man to pay the price that he would take our sin upon himself that we might receive mercy and grace. Jesus is the way that his justice and his love come together in perfect harmony. And this is where you hear the skeptics going, hold up, time out. This is where they're like, stop the bus. This is where I'm getting off, because now you're getting into all that weird theology and religion, hocus pocus stuff. So, you had me that maybe some guy somehow, but now you're getting all this weird salvation and sin and that kind of thing. And so they're like, time out. I'm out of here. But here's the thing. Just because someone wants to have the claim that a supernatural event is unlikely and they don't want to believe it, they just want to dismiss it away. If you really want to be intellectually honest and you look at this evidence, you have to say something happened. Now, what is it? And why should we believe it? Dipping back into Dr. Hunter's arsenal of arguments and whatnot, he has what is called, and it's actually in the book, I got it from somewhere else, this is what's called recalibrated plausibility. Right, so you have someone who's like supernatural, not plausible, I don't believe it. You go, okay, well, if we readjust our view and our perspective, we can make something that may seem implausible now appear to be plausible indeed. It's kind of the idea that, like getting the alignment on your car, getting your tires aligned. So then you're straight, or getting, if you need a new prescription on your glasses, getting it so you're actually able to see things clearly. See, because Jesus didn't just come out of nowhere. It's not that just all of a sudden this carpenter from Galilee says, hi, I'm the Messiah, die, rise again. Believe in me. There's actually a whole lot more to it that oftentimes doesn't get considered, but needs to get considered. And so here's the example that Braxton Hunter often gives. Let's imagine, okay, let's put on our, we're just going to imagine. You have no idea about the moon landing. You have no idea about NASA. You've never heard of any missions to the moon, never heard of Apollo. You've never heard of any of that. And you overhear some people talking about this guy, Neil, who is saying he walked on the moon. And you're thinking, that's ridiculous. You can't get to the moon. No one can walk on the moon. That's just absurd. But then what if you find out that there is an organization called NASA that has the ability, that has the technology, that has the capability to send someone to the moon? Oh, and there really is a guy named Neil who is part of that program and went to the moon. Okay, well, now that's looking more plausible. Whenever someone says, hey, this guy Neil walked on the moon. Well, now that's believable because the technology exists, the organization exists, these people exist. So now it's more plausible. Well, the same thing works with Jesus. Excuse me. What are the things that we might need to recalibrate the view of Jesus? I mean, if all you're thinking is, okay, dead carpenter rose again, why should I believe all of that? Well, he gives two examples in his, there we go, two examples. One, that God exists. Right? The comparison here is like NASA. NASA has the ability to send someone to the moon. Well, God exists. God has the ability to raise someone from the dead. He's got the power. And then you have what Jesus claims about himself. Just like Neil Armstrong would be claiming, I'm an astronaut, I'm part of this organization. Jesus is claiming, hey, I'm God's agent to get this done. Right? I am the Messiah. And so you can take a look at those, but I think there's more to it than that. I'm going to go ahead and add in a couple other things. Not only are there those two things, there's also the fact of God, of mankind's sinfulness, and you have fulfilled prophecies. I think that's something that often kind of gets overlooked, but I think is really important, and we take all of this into consideration. So, thoughts? Ooh, that was kind of loud. Thoughts, comments, questions so far?
So far, what you've been saying about you have to start with the idea that God does exist. So I'm glad that you're going over and saying, hey, I'm going to show you these are some facts that this is why we think. Because like you said, the skeptics step out, most likely because they believe that God doesn't exist.
Right.
So at that point, you start talking about salvation and everything else. I can prove, yes, there was a Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And then, so this is a good key point.
Well, and the book that we're using for this, I'm just doing the resurrection part because it's Easter time. It's called Core Facts, and FACTS is the resurrection stuff, why you believe in Jesus, and the core are arguments for the existence of God. So, I recommend the book. It actually does a good 1-2 punch that God exists, Jesus is true, believe. And so, but let's dig into some of this. One of my, has become one of my favorite because it's so simple and everyone can kind of get this, is what's called the Kalam cosmological argument. It basically says anything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. I mean, that's something so simple. Children kind of pick that up automatically, right? Children understand that things have reasons behind them. And so whenever you're talking about something like the universe that came into existence, there has to be a cause outside of the universe, outside of nature, that's above nature, that's supernatural, you could say. And I'm not really going to take the time tonight to get into why we should believe this is the case. One, that anything that begins to exist has to have a cause, because what else is there? That's one of those things that's like, if you can't agree with that, I'm not sure we can actually have an intelligent conversation, because like things can't cause themselves. I mean, that's pretty much your two options. Something causes itself or something else causes it. And you cannot cause yourself, because you don't exist yet, to cause yourself to exist. So anything that begins to exist has to have a cause. The universe began to exist. There's all kinds of ways you can talk about this. Some people prefer to take the science route and talk about Big Bang and whatever, and fine tuning. And that's all fine and good and fun if that's your cup of tea. I think it's a lot simpler than that. You just have to look at the fact that it is impossible to have a past infinite time. You cannot have a past infinite regress. If time goes infinitely into the past, then we would never be here. The example I've heard is it's like trying to jump out of a hole without a bottom. You can't do it. Time, it's literally impossible to have a past infinite time. So the universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. Well, what is that cause? Well, one thing we know about the universe, whenever we talk about the universe, we talk about all the contiguous space-time continuum, universe, multiverse, whatever you might be talking about. We're talking about space, time, and matter. Right? For physicists, it's actually, what we call the universe, space, time, and matter are all interdependent and necessary. So nature, the universe, is space, time, and matter. So whatever caused the universe cannot be in space, in time, or made of matter. So we're looking at something that's spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. However, we also know that it had to be something immensely powerful in order to create a universe. We know that it would have to be personal, because only persons can exercise will to choose to do something. And so if the universe wasn't existing, you would actually require a personal mind to cause it to exist, to choose that. And we do know it does have to be a mind, because the design, the intricacy, the order. So what we're looking at is a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, immensely powerful personal mind. What does that sound like? Besides you. Sounding a lot like God there. There's also the fact of human free will, right? I mean, it is just the natural state of humanity that we have free will, that we're able to look, to reason, to rationally assess and make decisions. Now, if God doesn't exist and all that we are is matter in motion, if all we are is the physical universe and bits and pieces, we're nothing but chemical dominoes falling. And the choices we make are purely deterministic based on the makeup of our brains and the other factors. And like I said, all we are dominoes falling. But we know that's not the case. If God doesn't exist, then we do not have free will, but we do have free will. So that would show that God would need to exist. Likewise, objective morality. If objective moral values and duties do not exist, or if God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist. But we know that objective morals exist. There are some things that literally are just evil. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks about it, right? The Holocaust, 6 million Jews gassed and killed, was evil. It doesn't matter how much the Nazis thought it was good. It was not. Right? Torturing a baby for fun is not good. It is an evil act. And it doesn't matter if the entire world thought that torturing babies for fun was good, they would all be wrong. It is evil. And so if actual immoral things exist, then God has to exist. In order for there to be a moral law, there has to be a moral law giver. And so there's just a few of the reasons why we should think that God exists. Also, there's a YouTube channel called Capturing Christianity. Cameron Bertuzzi is the guy who runs that. We've actually had him here at Liberty Hill a few years ago. I don't know, probably about 4 years ago now. He came and was a guest speaker, but he actually has, he had a couple of scholars, philosophers, and they actually went through 4 hours of, I want to say there were dozens, if not hundreds, of arguments for the existence of God. So you can go find this video, and it's just like 4 hours of these, egghead philosopher guys just talking about, here's why we should think God exists. There's no shortage of reasons to think God exists. There's a whole bunch of reasons to think that atheism's wrong. But the sinfulness and guilt of mankind. This is one of the most bizarre things that people actually think, well, we're all basically good. Have you met yourself? I mean, I know me, and I know the people around me. We all tend towards, we have this leaning, this bent towards a selfishness and a pride where we desire things we know we're not supposed to desire. So looking at the fact that we already know that objective moral values exist, that right and wrong are actual objective real things, there's the fact that we all want things that our conscience tells us we're not supposed to want. But we want it anyway, and we do it anyway, knowing full well that it's wrong. And this is kind of hardwired in, because of the fall, it's kind of wired into us now, kind of the condition of humanity, that we want things we're not supposed to have. Till a childish, you can't have that, and all of a sudden, they want to do everything they can to go get it. No matter what system of ethics, no matter what system of morality you want to ascribe to, you fail it. And you don't just fail it by making mistakes, you willfully don't want to do it. Even if you make up your own standard and go, I'm just going to live by what I think is right, you're still going to choose not to do that one. It's kind of hardwired into us that we want to be immoral. And we are. And so there is that undeniable fact that we desire to do what we know we shouldn't do, and we go ahead and choose to do it anyway. So we are guilty. We are sinful. If God exists and there is an objective standard of morality and we willfully violate it, then we're guilty of violating the moral code that God put in place. Then you have fulfilled prophecy. Right? This is often one of those things where it's like, oh, you religious people think that prophecy was fulfilled. No. It's not that. You can actually go, I'll try to remember to put a link in the video here for those who are watching. We did a study last year and a half ago, where we went through prophecies in the Bible that had been fulfilled, where we can actually point and go, okay, this was written down here, and look here, hundreds of years later, it happened, like proven in history by archaeology, and we went through that. And part of what we went through is where it's like, okay, here's what they said about Jesus, and here's what happened. And I mean, there it is, plain as day, right in front of you, and you've got to deal with it somehow. You have the ever popular Isaiah 53, right, where it talks about the suffering servant, the atonement for sins. I remember, I wish I could remember who it was. Man, that's going to kill me now. I can't think of his name. So someone took Isaiah 53, kind of took the chapter headings and title and everything, and just printed it up just as, like paragraph form, and went around their office. And I forget where they worked. It was some government office with like hundreds of people. And basically was asking people, hey, where do you think this is from? Where do you think this is from? Where do you think this is from? And every single person, including the Jews in their office, said, oh, that's from the New Testament. That's about Jesus. The atonement. That what it says, hey, this guy, the Messiah, he's going to come, and here's what he will do, and it's exactly what Jesus did. You have Psalm 22, right, where Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Well, you go back to the psalm that starts with that line, and it describes crucifixion. 700 years before crucifixion would be invented, almost 1,000 years before Jesus would be crucified, and it describes the crucifixion of Jesus perfectly. You have Jeremiah 20, all through Jeremiah, he talks about all over the place, about a new covenant, that a time is going to come where God will establish a new covenant with his people. Not like the one he had before, but this one's going to be different. And Jesus came and said, here I am to fulfill this new covenant. And then you have, you want to go all over the place, all these little prophecies here and there. There's hundreds in the Old Testament that were fulfilled in Jesus. I saw someone had a list where it was something like, I didn't get a chance to test them, but something like 30 prophecies that were fulfilled by Jesus in one day. You start looking at these things and it's like, come on, just dismissing it away is just showing intellectual dishonesty, a willful choice to just not believe. It gets to some point where it's just you're sticking your fingers in your ear and humming real loud because you don't want to hear it. And then lastly, you have Jesus's claims about himself. As I think it was Dr. Mike Licona, New Testament scholar, historian, who said basically that Jesus claimed to be God's special eschatological agent. That is, he was the one who he claimed of himself that he was there to bring in the kingdom of God. And probably one of the best ways to look at this, to think about this, to demonstrate this, is Jesus's favorite title to give himself. Any ideas what that was? He used it over 80 times in the Gospels to refer to himself. Son of Man. Which, and especially in several of the contexts he uses it, is a direct reference to Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, where Daniel has a vision, and it's a vision of the Messiah. And he says, I was watching the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with clouds of the heavens. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. Okay. No, not yet. Okay. So, just thinking of those. It's like, oh, all right, before it's like, okay, resurrection, but what am I supposed to do with that? Well, let's recalibrate. Let's take some other things into account. And so knowing all of this makes the resurrection all the more plausible because now it's not just, hey, he was dead and then, people saw him alive. Now you have this whole broader historical religious context into which Jesus steps. And so it's not just that we have to figure out, okay, did he really die and then was he really seen afterwards? Now we have all these other things that we have to make sense of. So whatever your opinion is about Jesus, it has to consider and account for Jesus' death, Jesus' burial, the disciples losing hope, the empty tomb, the reported appearances, their commitment of the disciples to proclaim this and stand their ground even to the point of death. You have the early testimony of the church that says, this is who we are, this is what we believe. He was crucified, he rose on the third day. You have enemies and skeptics like Paul, who go from persecuting the church to being its number one evangelist. You have the brother of Jesus, who thought he was a nut job while he was alive. Now suddenly he's a leader of the church, proclaiming that his half-brother is God incarnate. You have all of this taking place in Jerusalem, where it would have been infinitely easy to disprove and to show that they're making it all up and that it's not true. You have this claim about Jesus himself that says, I am God and I am here to usher in the kingdom. You have the fact that God exists. You have fulfilled prophecies. You have objective morality, and you have our guilt before a holy and righteous God. You got to do something with all of that. It's not just a simple matter of, okay, he was crucified under Pilate, and then they saw him alive later. No, you have to do something with all of this. Whatever it is you're going to believe must account. And whenever we take in the whole of the known facts and evidence, not only do we find that the resurrection is eminently plausible, that it is the explanation that best fits the facts, all other explanations kind of start to look kind of absurd. And we've gone over what some of them are. Right? There's people who say, well, maybe he didn't really die. No, he did die. Historians confirm Jesus really did die. Well, the disciples lied. Really? Because they were willing to go to their deaths saying, this really did happen. I saw it happen. People don't do that. They don't die for things they know are lying. You start, breaking out the cat of nine tails and the crosses and, whatever else, people might abandon that lie. Well, it was a conspiracy. Well, no, that didn't really work, because in order for a conspiracy to be successful, you need a small number of conspirators with good lines of communication so they got all their stories straight. What you have with the disciples is you have a dozen or more guys who are spread out throughout the empire, can't talk to each other, but all their stories are lining up, and not one of them are willing to recant. Might say, well, he wasn't really buried in the tomb. There's one guy, a liberal Christian scholar, who says that it was more common for the Romans to throw crucifixion victims into a mass grave, or just kind of cast them out and let the animals have them. So that's what happened to Jesus. Well, no, because actually what we have is the historical evidence shows he was put into a tomb. So you'd have to deny that. This whole resurrection thing, it was just made up later. It was a later legend invented. No, it wasn't. Within 3 to 4 years, some put it earlier, some put it within 1 year. The early church was saying, this is what we believe, that he was crucified and on the third day rose again, and he appeared to the 12. So it wasn't a later invention. It was from day one. And on it goes. There's all kinds of different claims, and every single one of them fail, because in order to believe them, you have to deny other things that we know are true. The only one that hits all the facts is the resurrection. And so we see that with the resurrection being the best explanation of all of these facts, we also see then that the gospel message is almost certainly true. It's the most consistent with reality. that there exists a just and holy God, that we have transgressed his law, that we are guilty and deserving of judgment, and that Jesus, by his death and resurrection, paid the price for our sin. And that if we turn from our sin, our pride, our selfishness, we confess that Jesus is Lord, and we follow him, we can be saved and have everlasting life, which we were created for, in which our sinfulness keeps us from. So we forsake the sinfulness and we follow the Lord. Because that's what the facts show. That he really did die. That he did appear to the disciples and skeptics and over 500 others. And they were so committed to this message, they were willing to die for it. And that all the testimony of history, from the Bible to extra-biblical things to archaeology to everything else, is pointing to this being true. And it all makes sense because we're sinners in need of a Savior. And the context of the world, of God existing, of everything else comes together to show, yes, this is indeed the reality of the world in which we live. These are the facts. And I'm done. Thoughts, comments, questions?
What if Jesus was a twin?
What if Jesus was a twin? Wonder if his brother James knew that he had twin brothers. And that one died. and that's one of the things. I mean, it's like among the believers are his own family. I think they would know. They were in on it. Yeah, that's right. They were in on it. Conspiracy. Oh, wait. No, we already ruled out lies and conspiracy. Next. Crazy thing is, you can sit here and do this all day long. Oh, yeah, well, what if? Nope. Missed that one. Well, what about? Nope. Here's this one. The only one that actually makes sense of all of it is that it's actually true. God really does exist. You really are a sinner. We really do need saved. And he's the one that came to do it.